Tai dabar, kaip mums dabar šitą
Nu, mes
pasižiūrėti,
pasidarysim.
kaip nors, kad aukščiau jam būtų knautis. Oi.
Įtaisysim. Gerai.
O,
Gerai, puikiai. So,
nekvėpuoja
yes,
tegul.
if you stand in front, you can see a map. You can see a map of the Soviet Union, the huge territory of the Soviet
Okay.
Union.
Vilnius,
Uh,
Riga,
and
Talinas.
yes, these are the Baltic countries, though it's a tiny area. Here is Vilnius, Riga, and Tallinn.
Ir čia yra tikroji Rusija.
And
Ir
actually, this
užtenka.
is the size of the real Russia. The Moscow and around, this is where indigenous Russians used to live. So
Ir
all
čia
these lands, they were conquered in time. You know, there were a lot of small tribes, indigenous people living. The whole area, this is Ural Mountains. So the whole area behind of the Ural
Siberia.
Mountains is Siberia.
taip.
So when
O
you
čia
hear the word
Alaska.
Siberia, I don't know what do you imagine, but please know that this is huge, vast area.
Čia be galo daug tautų užkariavo.
And they used to be, they still theoretically
Rasių.
are a lot, hundreds of tiny tribes and nations, which were conquered, and you know, they lost their identity. You know, they don't speak their languages. They were used as slaves of the regime. They are still like slaves of the new country, let's say. Doesn't matter how you call the country, people are still there and they still are used.
Tai va, tai dabar visi ženkliukai puikiai žinom Lietuvą.
And you may see those dots and triangles. So these are the places where only Lithuanians were deported. These is the places of deportation. Priminkite, aš visą laiką
Tai lageriai,
niekada neatsimenu.
taškiukai
So
apskriti šeimos.
when you see the triangles, these are the camps, the labor camps, where men and women were separated. They were not together. Where are dots? After the war, when the families were deported, they could stay together. So when you see dots, this is later deportations when the families could stay together. So
Taip.
that's why different
Ir metai
symbols.
šitie puikiai matai.
Yes, so you can see that dates of deportation. So from 40 till 88.
Wow. So they're almost the end.
Almost till the end. Of course, the numbers were less,
Less,
Yeah.
right.
way less, but still. You know, the last partisan in Lithuania went out of his bunker in the forest in 1986. Because his sister who provided him with food, she died. He has no any food, and he decided that, well, I will die anyway if I stay in the bunker, or if I'll go out, probably the same. So he even have no clue about the changes in the country and around, because you know he was by himself under the ground for decades.
Ir lageriai tai nereiškia, kad vieni vyrai. Labai daug merginų, moterų taip pat.
Yes, and the labor camps, but probably many of us can imagine that these are the gentlemen who are working in different fields, like cutting the wood, the forest, making the railway. But there were also ladies and children. There were ladies and children living in these unhuman conditions and doing such horrible, very hard work, and they were very little provided with the food and almost none clothing. So imagine they left the country in June. So what do you wear in June? Short sleeves. So that's how you appear in Siberia, where the temperatures are just, way different, let's put it this way.
O tada
So that is,
pasakom, kad
let's say,
traukinys
yes, that
tik
was
šitas.
the first month. It's approximately till here. They arrived to this area. So you imagine that's the month. And here they spent, Irena and her mother and her brother, they spent a year on the first place.
O čia irgi ne Rusija. Čia yra Altajai.
So this is-
Visiškai tautelė.
This is Altai Mountains, and there are also indigenous nation, Altai people. And Altai has a lot of gold in the mountains. So she said, what an irony. The people, the men, they are working in the gold mines, but they were so poor. She said, I've never seen before in my life so poor people. They had nothing. They are not slaves, you know. They are not in the camps. They are living there. They have just the small huts. They don't have even beds. They sleep either on the floor or on the benches. They barely have something to eat. And she said, she lived in Kaunas, which at that time was capital city. She said, I've never ever seen anyone living so badly. And when her mother, who was educated and she could speak few languages, she knew Russian as well. She was telling those people, you know, about their life in Kaunas, what they had, how they were dressed. They were listening and said that, but we still live better. Can you imagine how brainwashed these people were? They couldn't believe even that it could be a different life and that could be better. Because it was always told, what I even remember from my childhood, that the best country on the world is it's Soviet Union. There is nowhere else better life than here. So, you know, if you are constantly repeated, this is the best country, so probably you will start to believe. You remember George Orwell. 2 + 2 is 5. If you constantly repeat it, it becomes 5.
Taip, o po metų dar 2 mėnesiai ir čia jau baigėsi mums geležinkelis, jau viena upė, kalnais, dar kita upė, 2 mėnesiai ir mes čia atsidūrėm.
And after a year here, which was bad, but was not so bad, as there was some vegetation here, so you can, you know, eat grass, something is growing there. But later they by train, 2 months by train, they walking by trucks and by rivers. They finally appeared here at the Arctic Ocean. This is here, and this is, you can see the same piece of land on the different scale.
Čia tai mūsų paminklai tik pažymėti tie raudoni.
And this is delta of Lena River, so you know, delta forms a lot of small islands. So on all those islands there were many camps.
Ir šitaip Liepos pabaigoj, čia ką matot, tai 89 ekspedicija, čia buvo ir čia jurtas. Nieko ženklo nėra.
So if you look at those pictures here at the bottom, you can see the landscape. This is the summertime. The summertime, it's only July, and that's the best what you can see. A little bit of the dirt, because there is no vegetation. It's eternal frost, so it defreezes like few centimeters only. There's some layer of mud. So they arrived here at the beginning of August, when already was starting to snow. So she said that we perfectly realized, of course not the kids, but the adults, that winter is already coming, we have to hurry. So when they arrived, there was nothing there. There were no any buildings, no one lived before, no one lived after.
Why were they moved after a year? Who knows?
Who can tell you? Yes, that was an order, and you know, they were told to go and they go. So you don't question those things.
And these were not only Jews,
There were no Jews here, there were Lithuanians. We are talking about the Soviets and Lithuanians.
Jurtos keletas iš
Yes, and you know, when they arrived here, there was nothing. And as there are no trees, so they have no material to build anything, only drifted wood. So what their first task was, there were some ships here coming with the provision for soldiers, the guards who have to guard them, because no one live here. So they have to build houses for the soldiers from the proper wood which was on the ships, and they had nothing for themselves. So in the evening, after the whole day of working for the soldiers, they were collecting the drifted wood and trying to build some shelters for themselves. So that was, you know, like she said, it would be very luxurious, because you know, drifted wood is not straight, it's just branches and whatever. So from those woods they were bringing making like shelters, and then they put the mud which they could take on the top, turf like here, and to make those kind of shelters. I don't know the proper word in English for that. How do you call? You can't call it house, you can't call it hut maybe. Yes, so that's what they built for themselves. But again, as she always the size it's correct. The measurements are correct, but the material is much luxurious here because they could use good wood and they could, cut with the tools, some tools to use to cut the turf, the mud or whatever to build it. And there is glass in the window. There was no glass. They put the ice. They cut the ice and put instead of the glass the ice, piece of ice.
Ir viduj mums prišalo.
And they had no heating, so inside it was heated just by the body heat. And it means that there was a big layer of ice inside.
Wow.
Ir taip, -2 kai kūreni, o kūreni tik grįžęs.
So it was always
-2.
minus. It was always
šiaip
minus.
-4.
Of course, it was much better than outside, but still, Later they managed from what the soldiers were, throwing away. They collect everything and they used to improve their conditions as much as they could. So they make kind of stove, which if they find some wood, they can heat a little bit. But nevertheless.
Ir be to mes dar su suknelėm.
Yeah, and she said they are still in summer clothing.
Įdirbom.
They were not provided with anything. So that's why when people ask, she probably had 3 million times the question how you survive. There is no any explanation, no scientific explanation how people could survive in such conditions, dressed in such a way, not fed well, how they survived. Who can tell you? She spent here at this area with her mother who died the second winter and her brother 6 years. After 6 years, aš jau toliau pasakoju, gerai, Irena? Aš pasakosiu apie jūsų jau ten išsivadavimą, mes dar biškį grįšim, bet aš tiesiog tą pačią istoriją.
Kuo trumpiau apie mane.
She is so modest. I always tell, I'm telling your story. She said, don't tell about me, nothing, just tell about general things. So she stayed here for 6 years. She was deported when she was 13. So, had no food, had no clothing. So she said after 1 year, and so it's already 7 years altogether, she said, I was so sick that I couldn't walk. She was bent like this because I had open wounds on all the body. It was horrible. But that's the movie story really, because there was Siberia. It's not only the forest. There are some cities as well, and some cities with the universities. So here there is a few cities, and one of them is Yakutsk. So there was a ship of scientists who were going by the river up to here. Well, as a scientist, they did some research and, collected some information, and they end up at this, place where these people are. So, of course, they understood what is going on. They couldn't save any people from here, but, there are no proper explanation of why. But out of those many people who were there, they picked up Irena, and they managed to convince the soldiers that she is very smart. Who cares how smart how can you know that she is smart? That she is very smart, and that will be much more use for Soviet Union if she will get some education. So the soldiers let her go with them. So they brought her to Yakutsk, and then they said that now you go by yourself. We can't help you more. They just picked her out of all those people, and she ended up being in the city. By that time already she was able to speak Russian, so she was going through the school to school. She finds some kind of college where she could get some money, as a student, and she studied. She spent 10 more years in that town, and then that's a kind of unknown story how she escaped. She is not willing to tell. Either it's too painful, or too sad memory. So, or maybe other people involved. So I don't interrogate her. But after 10 years more, so totally 17 years, she came back to Lithuania illegally. She was hiding in the trains. She was walking in different means of transportation. So finally she ended up back in Lithuania, but again she has no documents because she escaped. She is illegal person, and in Soviet Union, if you don't have document, you are not human. You know, because who you are, where do you live, what if you have no document, you can't register anywhere to live. If you do not live anywhere, you're not registered, you can't go to get any job. So it's kind of closed circle. So she was hiding, even being back to Lithuania, because if they will find out that she escaped from the camp, she will be sent back immediately. So she was hiding, being back for a few years. She said, I slept everywhere, under the bridges, in the forest, sometimes at the friends, but again, she didn't want her friends to risk. So, you know, one night she spends in one place, then the next night she's going somewhere else. So after a few years, finally, the people she knew, they helped with the passport, fake passport, and you know, at the end the story is happy end, because you know, with the passport she could get the job. She met wonderful husbands, you know, the gentleman who became her husband, and she has a daughter, she has grandchildren, and so on and so forth. So the end of the story is pretty nice, but those 17 years, this is something what's just really is hard to explain, how she even managed to survive. Not to mention that her brother spent 25 years at that
Did they reconnect?
at that place.
They reconnected.
They were able to reconnect, and he came back after 25 years to Lithuania, but you know, his health was completely destroyed. So he didn't live very long when he came back. He passed away.
How many people would live in something like this when they built them?
About 40. Because you know, you can have a look inside how big it is, but she said that because we were so skinny that the only way of get some heat is the body heat, so that's why they were laying one to each other. That's the only way to get a little bit of warmth.
What year was she deported?
41.
41.
She was an early one.
Yeah. The first, when the families
wave.
were separated, yes.
Aš tik noriu perspėti.